Hello, and welcome to the Truly News Podcast. These podcasts are available every day starting at 7 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Central, 5 a.m. Mountain, and 4 a.m. Pacific. You can find your podcast at trulynews.org, on Spotify, and at Apple Podcasts. To support this program, go to trulynews.org or support us on Patreon. This program is produced by the Civic Health Coalition, a nonprofit, so contributions are tax deductible. We start each podcast with a brief introduction in case you are listening for the first time. If you have heard the introduction and want to skip ahead to the news, then go to 2 minutes and 35 seconds in the podcast. That is where we begin our coverage of today's news. This podcast was created as a way to provide you with the important news of the day. But more importantly, it was created as a new way to receive the news, a source of news that presents information in a positive and impartial way. Unfortunately, many headlines and articles usually focus on the negative aspects of the news. Sensationalism and controversy are used to grab people's attention. However, for us, the consumers of that news, that negative focus can impact our emotions and mental health by creating feelings of anxiety, agitation, and even anger. As an alternative, we review the news for you and filter it in a way that keeps you informed, but does so in a fresh, positive, and healthy way, the way that news was truly meant to be. Using many different news sources from many different types of news organizations, we also try to provide an unbiased and broad overview of the day's news. We don't skip any issues because it may not be good news. We simply present everything in a calm, rational, and objective way. The first part of the podcast focuses on the top headlines from over a dozen different news sources. Those news sources include the top-rated news channels, the largest newspapers from across the country, and the top-visited news websites. After reviewing the major headlines, we then review a broad spectrum of news that covers the categories of science, technology, economics, health, and world events. Finally, we conclude our podcast with a feel-good news, which are stories from across the country that highlight the positive things that people are doing. The types of stories that inspire, uplift, make us feel positively connected to the rest of the world and to humanity. So, now that you understand the purpose of this podcast, we begin today's episode. From the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains in beautiful Colorado, it is Thursday, September 24th, 2020, and this is Truly News. I am your host, Jason Van Sickle. I hope that your week is going well. We are officially 2 days into fall, and most places across the country have started seeing some cooler weather. Hopefully it is a beautiful day today where you live. If it's not already in your routine, then think about taking some time to get outside today. Nature, even if it is simply sitting on your porch, deck, or balcony, or possibly taking a walk, is a great way to relax and clear your head. As always, we start the podcast with a look at today's top headlines, so on to the news. From Reuters, McConnell vows orderly transition of power after U.S. election. U.S. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell on Thursday said that there would be an orderly transition following the November 3rd presidential election, one day after Trump declined to comment on whether he would support a peaceful transition. Another headline from Reuters News, mourners pay respect to Ginsburg at U.S. Supreme Court. Mourners filed quietly past the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's flag-draped coffin outside of the white marble court building on Wednesday as the United States began 3 days of tribute to the liberal icon. Finally, from Reuters News, Eric Trump must testify in New York probe before the election. A New York judge on Wednesday ordered the President Donald Trump's son, Eric, to make himself available by October 7th to be interviewed under oath for a state probe into financing for properties owned by his family's company. From the Chicago Tribune, protests spread across the country after Breonna Taylor announcement in Kentucky. Anger, frustration, and sadness over the decision not to charge Kentucky police officers for Breonna Taylor's death poured into American streets as protesters lashed out at a criminal justice system they say is stacked against black people. And those are your top headlines from across the country. To lighten things a bit, it is now time for our daily top 5 joke countdown. These jokes come from Reader's Digest at rd.com, which is an archive of thousands of jokes. Warning, some of these jokes have been altered in a completely ineffective effort on my part to make them even funnier. Our category for today is cute puns, and here is your top 5 countdown. Number 5. How do you put a baby alien to sleep? Answer: you rock it. Number 4. What do you call a bee that can't make up its mind? Answer: a maybe. Number 3. What do you call a pig that does karate? Answer: a pork chop. Number 2. What kind of undershorts do clouds wear? Answer: thunder shorts. And your number 1 joke of the day: what do you call an everyday potato who likes to talk about the news? Answer: a commentator. Oh boy, that was one of the rougher lists. However, we made it through it, and if you didn't necessarily find any of those to inspire your own belly-aching laugh, then at least write them down or commit a few to memory. They are sure to get some laughs the next time that you are around someone under the age of 8. Moving on, we now take a look at today's science headlines. From Popular Science, regular doses of awe can do wonders for emotional health. This article is about a research study that was done by a University of California neuroscientist and published in this week's edition of the journal Emotion. In the study, researchers asked participants to take a weekly 15-minute outdoor walk. Those participants were put into 2 groups, with the first group given no further instructions. However, the second group, what was called the Awe Walk group, was given the additional instruction to be extra observant about the world around them and try to look at things like a curious and fascinated child. Lead researcher Virginia Strum says, quote, "When they went on their walks, we wanted them to try to increase their experiences of awe by attending to the world around them and tapping into their childlike sense of wonder," unquote. The results found that the Awe Walk participants felt an increasing number of positive feelings and felt more connected to the world. Those feelings sometimes lasted days after the walk. In science news from Scientific American, is there life on Venus? These missions could find it. An international team of researchers recently announced the detection of phosphine gas on Venus. On Earth, phosphine is only made by microbes that live in oxygen-free environments. Therefore, the discovery of phosphine gas on Venus created a lot of excitement, since it signaled the possibility that there could be some type of microbial life on the planet. NASA is now looking at planning a mission to send satellites with orbiters and probes to Venus to further analyze. Those missions would likely occur later in the decade, since it takes years to design, build, and launch a space mission. Finally, from Smithsonian Magazine, human footprints found in Saudi Arabia may be 120,000 years old. The footprints are possible evidence that humans left Africa, the birthplace of humanity, and spread out to other areas over 100,000 years ago. And that is your science news for today. In technology news, CNN reports that Walmart is using drones to deliver COVID-19 tests. If you need to get a COVID-19 test but don't want to go near people, Walmart's got you covered, at least if you live near their North Las Vegas store. Walmart launched a pilot drone delivery program Tuesday that will drop off COVID-19 tests to homes within a 1-mile radius of the North Las Vegas store. From Engadget, Google Maps now shows you COVID-19 stats. Google has already released a number of COVID-related features on its Maps app, including noting potential transit delays due to the outbreak, the relative busyness of local businesses, and tagging the locations of nearby COVID testing sites. On Wednesday, Google announced yet another new feature which will inform users as to whether new cases of the virus are on the rise in areas that they may want to visit. From CNET, Amazon's big Alexa, Echo, Fire TV, and Ring event is today. At this private annual meeting, Amazon will announce the newest versions of its popular electronic products as they gear up for Prime Day on October 13th. Prime Day is actually a 2-day event where Prime customers are given special savings on many items. The announcement of the new products also comes as we begin to head into the holiday gift-giving season. And those are your technology headlines. From the world of business, Reuters reports that Wall Street closes lower on fears of slowing economy. Wall Street's main index fell sharply on Wednesday after data showing a cooling of U.S. business activity and the stalemate in Congress over more fiscal stimulus heightened concerns about the economy while the coronavirus pandemic remains unchecked. From USA Today, Trump administration moves forward antitrust action against Google. As the Trump administration moves forward antitrust action against search giant Google, it's engaged in a campaign to enlist support from sympathetic state attorneys generals across the country. President Trump also continued to push his campaign against big tech on Wednesday, touting curbs on legal protections for social media platforms he denounced as biased against conservative views. From CNN, economists are growing more worried about the recovery. The U.S. economy recovery will slow more than feared during the final 3 months this year because Congress almost certainly will not provide more federal aid, according to a report released by Goldman Sachs this week. And those are your business headlines for today. In health news, CNN reports that more than 20 states report an uptick in new COVID-19 cases after U.S. tops 200,000 deaths. CNN also reports Johnson & Johnson's coronavirus vaccine is fourth to begin Phase 3 trials in the United States. The Los Angeles Times reports the CDC is now reporting that young adults are the largest group of Americans getting COVID-19. The new study from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention reports that median age of people with COVID-19 in the U.S. has declined over the spring and summer, and Americans in their 20s now account for most cases of people getting COVID-19. And those are your health headlines. Moving on to world news. Here are Reuters news agency's world headlines for the day. Trudeau says Canada is in a second wave of pandemic. Trump imposes new bans on Cuban rum, cigars, and hotels. From CNN, Kenya's Maasai gather for a once-in-a-decade ceremony to turn warriors into elders. Thousands of Maasai men clad in red and purple shawls and with their heads coated in red clay gathered this week for a ceremony that transformed them from warriors to elders. Around 15,000 men from all over Kenya and neighboring Tanzania congregated in the Maparasha Hills to feast on an estimated 3,000 bulls and 30,000 goats and sheep. The ceremony occurs once every decade at the site. On Wednesday, the men roasted the meat on beds of coal while holding staffs and swords. There are about 1.2 million Maasai living in Kenya. According to Britannica.com, the Maasai are a fully nomadic tribal people who wander in bands throughout the year, subsisting almost entirely on the meat and milk of their herds. Men move up through a hierarchy of grades, each lasting approximately 15 years, which include junior warriors, senior warriors, and junior elders. Eventually, they may reach the rank of senior elder who is authorized to make decisions for the tribe. The Maasai society is remarkably egalitarian, seeing people as equal and deserving equal rights. That is a great example of the amazing cultural diversity that still exists on this planet. And those are your world headlines. As always, we end our broadcast with a look at what we call happy news. These are headlines from across the country of people doing good. And in our happy news headlines today, our first story comes from Alexander City, Alabama. Recently, two Benjamin Russell High School football players decided to head to McDonald's for lunch. When they got there, ahead of them in line was a mother and her 4-year-old daughter. In an effort to be friendly, and in a random act of kindness, the two offered to pay for the young girl's Happy Meal. The mother used the experience as a teaching moment for her daughter on random acts of kindness, and they later paid the generosity forward with their own act of kindness to another stranger. In an online post, the girl's father later said that the whole experience had a lasting impression on his daughter and their family. What a great example of how acts of kindness can spread. These two teenagers should be an inspiration for all of us to get out and do more random acts of kindness. Our next story comes from WHIO-TV in Dayton, Ohio, about a McDonald's employee who showed kindness to a mother in the drive-thru. After spending the day running a car full of kids between doctor's appointments, sports practices, and school, Brittany Reed decided that dinner that night would be quick and simple. McDonald's. After placing her order, Brittany suddenly realized that she had left her wallet at home. With a backseat of crying children, Brittany herself now wanted to cry. Pulling up to the pay window, she explained that she would have to cancel her order and come back later. Without hesitation, the teenager working the drive-thru window, with the name tag Wyatt on his shirt and a McDonald's sticker reading "I am essential," said, "No worries," and he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and paid for the meal. Talking about the experience, Brittany said, quote, "It took me back and made me realize there's so much good out there," unquote. Later, she returned to McDonald's to thank and repay Wyatt. It took some convincing to get him to accept the money, but he did. And Brittany left him with a few final words of encouragement, saying, "You doing that meant so much to me, and I never want you to lose that. Always be the person with a kind and big heart." Wow. A teenager, probably making minimum wage, working during COVID, still has the heart to dig into his own pocket and pay for a stranger. What a great story. And our final story comes from Sanford, Michigan. When a historic flood hit the area several months ago, the home that Penny Tyler had lived in for 55 years, since she was just a little girl, was destroyed. When the Sanford Dam failed and flooded the area, Penny was able to escape, but all that she was able to save was her dog Bugsy and one container filled with family photos. When she returned, she found a house that would need to be completely gutted and most of her belongings destroyed. Without flood insurance or any money to repair her home, things did not look good for Penny. However, when word began to spread of Penny's situation, the community rallied and came together to lend a helping hand. Now, Penny has a newly renovated home that is beyond anything that she could have imagined. In addition to newly renovated bedroom and bathroom, the house features a beautiful new kitchen with state-of-the-art stainless steel appliances. And even Bugsy came out ahead. He now has his own little custom doghouse next to Penny's rocking chair on the front porch. And that is your news for September 24th, 2020. Have a great day.